Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah, this is letter M, and today we will be doing my best books of 2024. Now, there are a couple of books on here that you will have already seen from recent content. I am so excited to be filming this video because I love being able to actually champion books. But heads up, the other videos, the more negative videos, they're also going to be filmed today, and that just is what it is. I'm not going to do these in any particular order because these are all spectacular books for spectacular reasons, as opposed to just ranking 10 to 1. No, these are all great. They are all on par, and I will be talking about these till the day I die. I want to get the first two done together though, as you will have seen from my most recent video that I ranked all the books I read for my Patreon book club, and these two came up top for very different reasons, but they are both so good. But I didn't want to just constantly be rehashing stuff, especially if you've just watched that video. So we will start with these two and I will be brief. The Bandit Queens is a thriller contemporary about an Indian woman living in a really small village whose husband is missing, but everyone assumes that she's killed him, and she is more than happy for people to assume that because it gives her a level of respect and protection in this place. However, things start to go awry in a very kind of Monty Python slapstick kind of way when one of the other brides in the village wants her husband murdered to protect her from an abusive partner. It has so many great themes. It does have a lot of triggers as well, so please go into that with that in mind. But I cannot recommend this book enough. It was spectacular. I am not even a little bit surprised it was longlisted for the prize, the Women's Fiction Prize. It's so good. In a very different style, we have Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. This is a true sentient house gothic. This is slow burn. This is majestic, and it is gory. Just Like Home follows a young woman who has returned recently to her family home, which she has not visited for some time because her father was arrested for being a serial killer. Something that she knew stuff about growing up that was very traumatizing for her and very formative, and we find out that actually she's got quite a dark past as well, as she uncovers more mysteries of the house. It's so clever, it's so beautifully drawn out, has LGBT rep, beautiful gothic tropes, and it feels like a villain origin story. It's so good. So those are my first two. Please go read these. They are the best of the books I read last year. So something that I finally tried this year just gone is Spy X Family or Spy Family. This is about several different individuals kind of coming together with a group mission, all kind of working to their own agenda and not talking to each other, but becoming a family. I have recently finished volume 4 and I'm really enjoying it. We have this guy on the front who is Twilight. He is a master spy. He is a master of disguise. He is an all-round good guy. You then meet his future wife, who is an assassin. You then meet his adopted daughter, who he needs for a specific mission, who is psychic. My cat is now attacking my foot. Each installment is kind of a mini mission or a step into a wider narrative. What I really liked about this is that it's very entry-level manga. It is not difficult to digest. It is one of those things that you can kind of just fall into the world. The wider world building makes sense without you even necessarily, because it's kind of like a fantasy version of certain westernized places. So with that in mind, it makes it a book that I can recommend time and time again, whether you are a manga reader, a graphic novel reader, or if this is your first attempt to read either of those formats. Next one is my first 5-star of the year, which is The Girls I've Been. This is a YA thriller contemporary that follows a young woman called Nora who thinks her day is going to be super awkward because she's being confronted by her new girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend, but actually it gets so much worse when during a bank heist they get taken as hostages, and she has to use her former knowledge of her many identities and the skills that she learnt as a con artist to kind of get her favorite people out of the scenario. I really like that this was a really fun Die Hard style novel with great character building, great dialogue, and kind of a great exploration of LGBT themes, trauma, childhood, and a lot of really fun stuff as well. It was action-packed. Every scene had something going on. There were explosions, there were fights, there were gun shootouts, all sorts of things. The pace was just there. You just fly through it. It is a lot of fun, and a very easy, gentle read, which if you need a guaranteed good time in January, which I always do, this was it. This was great. 10 out of 10, could not recommend higher. The polar opposite of that, but still a wonderful time, was The Foundling by Stacey Halls. Now, I have read The Familiars by Stacey Halls before. I did it as a buddy read with Kelly from the Velvet Library, and it was fine. It was fine. It was nothing super special. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't spectacular. This one follows a young woman who has to give up her child in the early Victorian era because she cannot afford to keep it, and she gives it away to this hospital, not realising that her baby is then taken the day after. So when she returns 5 years later, the baby is not there because it has basically been sold on to someone else, and she has to find this child. We then find out how the child's been living. She has to content herself with certain things about class and money and status, and it is all about family as well. What I really liked about this is men take such a back seat in this story. Like, such a backseat. Like, every man is an antagonist in some way, but generally not really part of the narrative, not even that necessary, which I think is really, really important, because this is a book about motherhood. It is about coming together as women, championing other women, and how we support each other when we are in a very selfish position. I loved it. It had me on the edge of my seat when certain things were kicking off, and I was really worried it was going to have a really dark, sad ending, and it didn't. It was really uplifting, and it was just a really magical historical fiction. And I thought there is always at least one historical fiction that makes it into my top 10 of the year, and this was this year's. Like, it was just great. It was just a truly wholesome, joyful, light gothic read, and considering I'm not a massive fan of Victorian Gothic, like, I'm really not, it really has to take a lot to get me hooked. I really like the characters of this, I liked the dynamic of them, and I really liked that it just wasn't the dreary, black draped, gross damask paperwork like version of Gothic, the gas lamp style Victoriana that sometimes is incredibly American and just doesn't feel British. This felt British, it felt wholesome, and it won me over. It won me over completely. I did say that that was the historical fiction. I do also want to give a massive, massive shout out to Last Night at the Telegraph Club for being another one of my top 10 books. This is by Melinda Lowe, and this follows a young woman in kind of 1950s America, but as a Chinese American, and kind of what that means to be a Chinese American, understanding the low rumblings of racism with the Communist Party kind of taking over certain areas in Asia, and what that then meant for Asian Americans, who was the ones designated as Asian Americans and who were just Asians, the kind of racism that was in that, but also the homophobia, because this is an LGBT romance, and it's really cleverly crafted. It's really well done. It is on the cusp of kind of a modernist world whilst also being very caught in its own time, which I really, really liked. I like that, again, it has a really kind of uplifting narrative to it, even though some of these themes are really, really dark and have a really dark twist to them. There is a massive trigger warning for homophobic behaviour and language. It's really interesting to see kind of the friendship dynamics within this, having had some interesting friendship dynamics of my own this year. There were some things that hit really home with that, but it is a beautifully crafted book. And another shout out needs to go out to Abby from Abby of Pellinor, who gifted this to me. Thank you so much for gifting me one of my best books of the year. I like to carry on a theme, so I'm also going to thank Celine for also gifting me one of my best books of the year. Alatsoye by Darcy Little Badger, I thought was a middle grade. It feels like it's got like a middle grade vibe. It's not. It is a YA supernatural murder mystery. It looks at Indigenous mythology, it has ghosts in it, and it is a beautiful, beautiful story about a young girl whose cousin is murdered, and she has to find out who did it and then prove it. And then it has this very kind of YA supernatural, not only the crime solving, but also the adventure that comes with that, with those supernatural beings. I really liked the different take on certain mythological creatures, vampires being one of them, ghosts being another, and how that works. Did it make me cry? Yes, absolutely. There is a scene where I thought something irredeemable happened and I wept, and I had to put the book down, and it really got me. And then it did kind of resolve itself, but I was just, I was broken. This book broke me. It was so good. It's so beautifully written. The pacing of it is really clever. And one of the things that I feel like not enough YA books do is the parents are good in this. Like, the parents are supportive. They understand. They are protective, but they work with their kid because they understand their kid has autonomy. And I love that for them. Like, top tier parents in this. So thank you so much, Celine, again, for gifting me one of my best books of the year. Okay, 3 more to go, and I want to talk about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now, I know that when Yellowface came out, there was a lot of controversy about it. There were a lot of comparisons to I'm Not Okay, I think it's called, which is the Netflix Paris show where a woman pretends that she was in the Paris bombings and wasn't. This was a really interesting take because I am not someone who hate reads. If I don't like a book or if I'm not enjoying a character, and it's not just that they're actively unlikable, but I can't get on with them, I don't read it. I can't read it. I really struggle. I am not someone who can force their way through with hate reading. I think the last book that I hate read was Den of Vipers, and that was hard work. And the only reason I did it is because I was buddy reading it with about 8 other people. So the only reason that I would ever hate read something. However, with Yellowface, I hated the main character. You are absolutely supposed to. She is terrible. She is the pinnacle of the entitled white woman who thinks that feminism should benefit her and no one else. It's fascinating. So she basically is best friends with this incredible Asian author who happens to die unfortunately in chapter 1, and then in the meantime she basically takes a manuscript that this author was working on, adapts it and makes it her own, and thinks that that's not plagiarism and that she doesn't deserve all of the terrible things that happen to her afterwards. And we really see this like rise and fall of her behaviour. Now, I know that there have been massive criticisms that R.F. Kuang did not push certain themes far enough, and I think they are completely valid. There are certain themes in this that look at messy behaviour of BIPOC people that doesn't really go far enough, but I think that's because that is not the central theme of the narrative. The central theme of the narrative is critiquing white women who feel entitled to women of colour's property, whether that is intellectual property, whether that is literal property. The entire time the main character is constantly justifying her behaviour because she feels she deserves the same thing that this other woman did. The whole premise of the book is that she is entitled to it. The one key flaw I found with that is that they redeem that thought, or they kind of justify that thought by having something be stolen from her by the woman of colour much earlier on. And she has essentially a sexual assault story that is taken by this woman, and that justifies everything she does. That I hated. Not just within her character, but as part of the premise. But it was so redeemed by the writing, by the clever nature of the cyclical cycle of this, the fact that trauma and aggressive behavior and microaggressions beget trauma and microaggressions was really clever, and you cannot fault the writing. Like, fundamentally this is so well crafted that even though I hated the main character and I hated her justification and I hated every choice she made, like everything she did, I sat there and I thought, don't do that, do the opposite of that, I still found it so compelling and could not put it down. And I thought that in itself deserved not only the 5 stars, but to be in my top books of the year. Is it a book I will actively recommend? Potentially no, because I think unless you're willing to go in and go, I hate these people, I hate this premise, the writing's great, it's really hard. And I think what's really interesting is I know there have been quite a few criticisms because there are direct references to R.F. Kuang within her own book. People love the Poppy War but had issues with some of the appropriation of other Asian cultures. I think that is a long and nuanced conversation that does not need to be drilled into when this book is looking at key themes of white feminism. I feel like this, in conjunction with like hood feminism, for example, or why I'm no longer talking to white people, needs to be taken in with those nuances and as an experience, as opposed to taken as gospel or taken as a complete condemnation of every white woman R.F. Kuang's ever met. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there is a grey area. This book not only lives in it, but thrives in it. And I think that is really fun, really clever, and is absolutely the reason why it deserves to be in the top 10 list. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have actively tried to avoid not only having authors that I've read multiple books of and therefore would love, but sequels or books that are part of a series in this top 10 list. I easily could have put a whole bunch of Skullduggery books in because I reread a whole bunch of them. They were great. They were some of my favourite reads of this year. I've read them before. You've heard me talk about them before. They're not new. One book that I don't think has made it into a top 10 list before is any of the Thursday Murder Club books, but I wanted to include the most recent, or kind of the last book of the Thursday Murder Club thus far, The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman, which is the 4th in the series. And the reason I wanted to include this is each book adds to the world building, which is great, but it develops something narratively within the characters as well. Each character, they get into relationships, they get out of relationships, they get into scenarios they struggle with, they get out of scenarios they struggle with. They're having a good time, they're having a bad time. It's an emotional roller coaster whilst they're also solving crimes in a really fun way. This one really hit home because one of the characters who is dealing with early onset Alzheimer's and dementia is rapidly getting worse, and whilst his wife is trying to protect him from that, he can't really be protected because he is caught up in a murder mystery that his memory is failing him and is not helping him solve. So it's really, really beautiful, but it really hit home because that is something that I am dealing with within my own family, and it got me. There is some really sad stuff to do with bereavement and grief in this. It is beautifully done. And it was one of those ones where Richard Osman has been working tirelessly to get us to love these characters as funny, jovial people. And then he gave us their worst day. And it was so well done. And it was so beautifully. And I just had a great time with it. I still think he has issues with Folkestone that he needs to address because he sets it around the entire area. And they visit Canterbury quite a lot. But he never seems to have anything nice to say about Folkestone. And I'm not sure how I feel about that as it being my hometown. And I very much felt attacked with the way certain things are portrayed around supporting people with dementia and Alzheimer's. Very, very much felt attacked by that. But I think as a fun read, as an engaging read, to get to know these characters, especially considering I don't often read books where the characters are older than 30 or 40. So to see them in their 70s and see them being champions in their craft is just a good time. And I feel like if you are looking for cozy mysteries, you can't really go wrong with this series. And last but by no means least, Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. I happily would have put Bury Your Gaze with this as well, but there was just something about the gruesome nature of Camp Damascus that needed its singular shout out, which is why I'm doing it last. Like I said, these are not in rank order, but this was such a good horror. Now, Chuck Tingle I had heard of vaguely through Amazon and kind of Goodreads and TikTok girlies talking about his weird and wonderful that you know what I'm talking about. This was like their debut horror as far as I'm aware, and certainly one of their debut traditionally published novels, and it's so clever. So Camp Damascus is a gay conversion therapy camp with 100% success rate, and throughout most of the novel you are trying to work out whether our main character Rose is being affected for it kind of because she lives in a similar area, or if she's going, and the kind of issues that kind of come up with that, but also what is it this camp is doing to control LGBT people and convert them back to straight people. It is dark, it is gory, and it is that from page one. Like, there is no gentle slow burn in this one. This is horror, this is dark, this is gory, and it's so good. It has some genuinely really funny moments. Every character is perfection. I adored everybody. Even the antagonists are a good time. There are pieces that you put together that you're just waiting for Rose to put them together. And then when she does, she actions it immediately. She's a very active protagonist, which we love. There is neurodivergent rep as well as LGBT. There are people of colour. There is really creepy mythology, which is just so cleverly done. And the monsters are gross. The monsters are so gross and they make me so sad, but it's so good. It's a really, really good time, and it is one of those ones where you can devour it in an afternoon. Like, it's so quick and everything happens so rapidly and so aggressively that you just can't put it down. And Bury Your Gaze is very, very similar, but has a more Hollywood vibe as opposed to a rural America vibe. So you've got the options. You can go city or you can go mountains. Your choice. Both are perfect, and I cannot wait for any more Chuck Tingle horrors. Please give them to me. I need them. So those are my top 10 books from 2024. I adored each and every one, and I hope you had some really great reads for yourself. Please leave a comment down below. Have you read any of these books? Are you likely to pick any of them up? Now you know how amazing they are. If you just want to leave an emoji, feel free to leave a butterfly or moth emoji to say that you were here. Treat yourself to something from Waypoint because it supports me and my content. Check out the links down below because I've got a Patreon now. And most importantly, have a nice day.